Hey everybody, Pete and the GenWell Project going live with Terri Wingham today. An amazing story, a beautiful human being who's making the world a happier and healthier place in her own way. And something I think we can all benefit from during these challenging times. So great to have Terri joining us today. Hi Terri.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you.
Good to see you again as well. And good morning, because I know you're on the West Coast. So
Sure am. And there's unfortunately people doing some yard work outside. So if you hear some background noise, not much to be done about it over here.
hey, I'm just happy somebody's outside and somebody's playing and getting dirty in the garden, because I think we can all use, a little nature, a little connection to nature, a little connection to everything right now.
For sure.
Although some extra sleep isn't a bad thing either.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to turn up my volume here so I can hear you clearer.
Sure.
Can you hear me there, Terri?
Yeah, you're coming through clear. How about me?
Yeah, all good, all good. Terri, great to have you on today. What we normally do when we get started here, I do a little introduction, both of the GenWell Project and the Connected Conversations, and then we'll get back to listening to your story. I had a few people, funny enough, I'll tell you this before we even get started. I had a few people reach out and say they were really looking forward to this conversation. So, and one of them just joined, Nikki, who made our initial connection,
Yeah.
who's online there. And Nikki, thanks for joining us. And I had another cancer survivor also reach out to me and say that he was looking forward to hearing your words. So looking forward to this conversation. So if you'll give me 2 minutes, I'll get through the early administration and then we'll get into the conversation.
Sounds great.
Awesome. So, hey, everybody, it's Pete from the GenWell Project. The GenWell Project's a human connection movement that since 2016 has been working hard to remind people about the importance of face-to-face social connection in their lives, and more importantly, inspiring them to take action. We were living in the most fast-paced, distracted, and pressure-filled world in history, and most of us weren't making time for the thing that would make us happier and healthier most days, and that's getting connected with family, friends, neighbors, and colleagues, and building the relationships that will support us through the ups and downs that we all go through. Obviously, we're now in COVID-19, and the message about the importance of human connection, I think, is being heard loud and clear as most of us wake up, either isolated in our own homes or even sensing the cabin fever of being locked up with the same group of people for a long period of time and not having many of those casual relationships that we are used to, whether it's with our local barista, with our friends around the water cooler or coffee machine at the office, or just in the day-to-day as we get around in life. We launched Connected Conversations at the start of COVID-19 in an effort to bring ideas, people, and tools to the forefront so that people who are struggling through these challenging times, because this is not easy for any of us. It's new for all of us being in this pandemic. But if we can introduce you to people, ideas, and tools that will help get you through these times by getting you connected to those ideas, thoughts, and people, then we think we're doing a great job in trying to help make the world a happier and healthier place. So today I'm absolutely thrilled to have Terri Wingham with us. Honestly, your story for me, Terri, is a powerful one. And when I think of the GenWell Project, when I launched the movement 4 years ago, the whole point was human connection is the bridge across every challenge that we face in life, whether it's poverty, food insecurity. I'm just going to change that. Does happen once in a while. We're still not sure why. Whether it's dealing with an illness, whether it's chronic illness, whether it's acute illness, whether it's job loss, relationship issues, the greatest thing we can all do for each other is to be there for each other. And I think this is probably the first conversation we've had specifically about cancer today and the journey that you've been on and the amazing things that you've done going through your journey. So let me do let me do a proper introduction for you here because you certainly deserve it. In 2009, at the age of 30, a breast cancer diagnosis changed everything for Terri. In an instant, she was transported from a corporate life as a successful headhunter in the technology industry to a foreign world of chemotherapy and surgeries. She couldn't stay in the dark place where cancer had deposited her, but didn't think that sitting in a traditional support group circle would help her heal her emotional scars or give her the tools to reimagine her future. For 6 weeks, Terri volunteered at an underfunded daycare in the townships of Cape Town and then traveled to Victoria Falls in Zambia, a place she had only ever dreamed about visiting. These experiences helped her see that the struggle is universal and that even if she couldn't go back to who she was before cancer, reinvention was possible. Terri could have never anticipated how her life would change over the next 5 years. She chased a dream to make a difference and have an impact on others each and every day. Today, as part of a fresh chapter, she is transforming adversity into possibility and couldn't ask for more meaningful work. Terri, thanks for being here with us today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So to say I'm inspired by that bio would be an understatement. And I think it's almost, actually, I don't want to get too far. What we always do before we get started, because I wanted to jump right into, everything about what you're doing. But what we always do in our conversations, Terri, is we check in with the people that we're talking to, because we're all going through the ups and downs of COVID-19. So before we get into the amazing work you're doing, how are you doing during COVID-19?
It's been a challenge for me, as it is for so many people. And I think, I'm doing okay. I think cancer and living out of a suitcase for years has made me pretty resilient. But we've had to definitely pivot our work and how we serve people and what that looks like. We had to cancel our first ever summit for our alumni. We had many people super excited to join us in New Orleans. So it's just been a challenging time. And I definitely miss the connections that everybody misses. I miss sitting on a patio, drinking a glass of wine with friends and just enjoying the simple pleasures in life. But overall, I'm doing okay.
Yeah, I think I think it's pretty clear. The research that I've seen, the number one thing people are missing in these challenging times are the connections. And as I said off the top, initially when we launched this, it was because people weren't making the time. And now let's hope that when we get to the other side of COVID-19, that we don't forget the things that we missed the most. I'm certainly looking forward to reconnecting with lots of people. And funny enough, even in the last 24 hours, I've had phone calls with friends where tears were shared. I've had emails shared where people are saying, I'm just not doing well, or I'm up and down right now. So I think all of us are seeing the impact of the instability, the out of routine, the if you want to call it the new normal, certainly what we're in right now. I think it's it's all new for everyone. But I think the other highlight for me is just the fact that, hey, if we've got food, water, shelter, safety, and security, as Maslow told us in 1943, then maybe that's what you're touching on, which is, hey, overall, I'm doing okay.
Mm. Yeah.
So Terri, tell me about a fresh chapter. You tell me about the journey that you were on to get to a place where you thought that traveling was going to be part of the solution for you in your journey with cancer.
Yeah, it's funny because I would say I was in a pretty great place in my life before I got cancer. I was living in Vancouver. I was a headhunter in the technology industry. Life was going well. I had great friends. And for me, cancer was such a challenging experience because it called into question what I thought my life would be and what made me happy. And so as I was going through treatment, I felt really well supported by friends and family, but really struggled with my identity and who was I beyond cancer and how was I going to pick up the pieces of my life, and did my old life fit anymore? It kind of felt like a sweater that was a little bit too tight. And so I had to think about, okay, what might a new life look like for me? And I think travel is a really powerful way to help us step out of the environment where we're sick and out of the environment where we maybe can't see new possibilities because were in that sort of routine. And so for me, I wanted something other than cancer to be the most recent story in my life. I wanted, when people saw me, to not ask me about cancer, but to ask me about something different. And so it was this desire to feel useful and empowered and inspired again that led me to sort of step way out of my comfort zone and travel to Africa in 2011.
And so you go over to Africa as a means, and I love what you said, and I will go back and I will quote you in some post somewhere along the way. But I love that you were like, I wanted something other than cancer to be the latest thing that happened in my life, which I think is a really powerful message. It's, move forward, find things to give you hope, aspirations, memories, stories, and all those wonderful things. But so you're on that journey to find your new story, and then something happens when you're there. And I think it was more about the new story, and it was more about more than just travel. And I think, can you tell us a little more what you discovered while you were there?
I think the whole experience of volunteering for me shifted my perspective. I got on the plane to Cape Town feeling very disenfranchised with my life, really angry that it hadn't turned out the way that I wanted. I wanted to be married with kids and a career, and I was single and 31 and, a cancer survivor with really short hair. And I felt pissed off, at the world. But then when I landed in South Africa, I had such a huge dose of perspective. I met people who struggled to feed and clothe their children. I met people who had lived through the oppression of apartheid or who had lost entire families to HIV. And I really saw that,
Wow.
yes, I'd been through cancer, and yes, it was really difficult for me, but I wasn't alone in struggle. And I could see all of these beautiful examples of resiliency. And it helped me think about, how lucky I was to be born in Canada, to get access to the kind of treatment that I got access to. And I wanted to do something meaningful with that privilege that I had in my life.
That is, wow, so many powerful, you were pissed off. You mentioned that you were living a life in which the sweater didn't seem to fit so much. Why do do you think it took a crisis to create the awareness?
I think it did for me. Everybody's different, but I think when we go through these sort of turning points in our lives where you can't go back and you have to find a new way forward, it forces you to ask yourself a lot of difficult questions. And one of the things we talk about in our programs is that sometimes cancer can be a magnifying glass that invites you to look deeper into these other challenges or issues that might have already been there, but cancer shines a light on them and invites you to do some of that deeper reflective work that when we're busy and in the midst of life, we don't really have time to do. We're just sort of getting through the day.
Yeah, and it doesn't always need to be a pandemic, and it certainly doesn't always need to be, frankly, it could be cancer, it can be a relationship, it can be a lost job, a career ending job that you thought was going to be, frankly, I can speak to it myself where, at times thought I was going to be, this person in this role, and that ended, and you were like, hold on a second, that's not the way this thing was supposed to work. But I think when something happens to your body, to you, who you are as a being, that it takes it even greater than just what I will say, which was for me was an emotional response to not getting what I wanted. I think it's got to be different when it's a cancer diagnosis, or maybe it's a chronic illness that means every day you're going to be battling a challenge. Do you think, is it different?
I think it is different only in the sense that for me, I was really confronted with my mortality in a way that I hadn't been before. I'd had other things not go my way, but suddenly I realized like I might die young, and it was that reality that I could die young that challenged me to really think about how I wanted to live. And so I think a health crisis can challenge us to think about how we want to spend our time in a different way than if we didn't have that sort of brush with our mortality.
I don't know how we, this is not really on topic per se, but how do you think we share that message with more young people? Is it multi-generational conversations that, people can talk about what you've been through? How do we get, how do we get us when we're young to listen to the story that you're telling?
It's a really complicated question, right? Because I think when we're young, we're infallible and we think, you know, we're going to live forever. And I think sometimes it's these challenges that we have to go through in our lives, but
Yeah.
maybe it's figuring out different mechanisms to help people with challenges that maybe aren't as severe as cancer or a pandemic, that there's this invitation to help people get curious. You know, one of the tools we talk about in our programs is developing a deep sense of curiosity and becoming a detective in your life and really starting to ask yourself, you know, how am I feeling about this? What does this mean to me? Why am I reacting this way? So I think with young people, if we can help them take the sort of setbacks in their lives and give them some tools to cope, maybe they can do some of that deeper reflection without having to have such a big crisis come into their lives.
Yeah, I almost wonder if the world will wake up. At least my hope is that I hope that we wake up on the other side of this pandemic. We know that young people had bought out of the idea of the big house and the white picket fence, and you know, being locked to an office or chained to a desk for the rest of their life in search of this, you know, likely unachievable goal. They were already there for many young people. So maybe this is actually the reinforcement that they were on the right page, and that, you know, we did need to change, and that we're all going to wake up on the other side of this. So you talked about being in South Africa. You talked about the resilience that you saw all around you, whether it was from AIDS or poverty or other challenges, and then something happened, and you know, you recognized that there was something special in the experience. Can you tell us, you know, what happened after you recognized what you recognized in your own head, what you were experiencing on the ground?
The volunteering, I think, is such a powerful element to helping us see ourselves in the world from a different perspective. And so it was during my 6 weeks that I was at this underfunded daycare, and I realized that these kids didn't care that I just had cancer. You know, they wanted me to play with them, to help feed them, to be there for them. And so it helped me realize that I was still useful and I had so much to give. And I thought, I can't be the only one that goes through cancer feeling like, you know, cancer has taken away so much, and feeling, you know, maybe trapped in a body that doesn't feel like yours anymore, or you're struggling with energy levels that you didn't have before, but really wanting to see how could we help people feel empowered instead of victimized. And so I think when I was there and volunteering, I really wanted to figure out a way to channel that empowerment and help other people feel that. And then I also was really fortunate that I had saved some money and took some money out of my retirement savings, actually, to do a bit of a trip through Africa. And I got to see Victoria Falls, which had been a lifelong dream of mine. And I think that was a really pivotal moment too, because a year before I hadn't been able to get off the couch. I was so sick. And now here I was having a dream come true moment on the other side of the world that I would not have had if it were not for cancer. So I started to think about, wow, if this is possible for me, what else might be possible? So it was that combination of volunteering, some deep personal growth and reflection, and then some once in a lifetime memories that made me think, wow, what if we could create this for other people? And that sparked the idea of creating a nonprofit that really helped people feel empowered to heal through service and personal growth and travel.
You know, I know we still have about 20 minutes to talk, but you've already inspired me, Terri, by your words and by your awareness. So much in what you just said there. You know, I've kind of created my own version of Maslow's hierarchy, and in there are my aspirations. You know, always keeping I have a list of the things I want to accomplish in life, because as long as you've got that list there, it's always something to say, hey, how can I go forward? What could I do next to keep my hope and keep my energy level up, to think, oh my God, maybe I'll go to Victoria Falls one day. And then at the very top of Maslow's hierarchy was always about self-actualization. And I put it in terms of when you recognize that life isn't about you, but what you can do for other people. And just listening to you talk about that experience and seeing the smiles on kids' faces and seeing that all they wanted was to have fun. A good friend of mine, Serena Condella, who's been on Connected Conversations, has spent her life with kids and creativity. And she just said, you know, there is nothing easier than putting a smile on kids' faces if you make the effort to have fun and play. And it's unfortunate that oftentimes we forget that when we get into the day-to-day of what life has to give to us, and certainly some of the challenges that you've been through. So you go through this, you're inspired by purpose. You're inspired by going to places that you thought, oh my gosh, maybe I'll never get to Victoria Falls. And you have an idea. And tell us a little more about A Fresh Chapter.
So I had this idea to create a nonprofit, but I didn't know anything about nonprofits. You know, I was working in the corporate sector in Vancouver, but I had this experience in Africa, and I thought, you know, what if I could do a trip around the world where I could put together sponsorship and sort of brainstorm this idea, work with different volunteer organizations, figure out what does this model look like. So I spent the first 6 months of 2012 doing that, and was really, I was lucky out of the gates. You know, I somehow managed to put this together. I won some contests for some support with my flights. I got introduced to the right people. And so I thought, oh, wow, this stuff's easy, you know. I had some beginner's luck, and I realized that starting a nonprofit isn't all that easy. But that 6 months was really powerful for me, and I realized that the program needed to be a facilitated model. It wasn't enough to just send people off on volunteer trips on their own, because I think what we've realized over time, it's the community that happens. It's creating a safe place for people to explore their stories and to really be honest about what they're grappling with, and be around other people who both can relate because they've been through cancer, but that also share these values of wanting to volunteer and wanting to grow and learn. So you have this sort of double thing in common, your cancer experience and the way you see the world. And I wanted to find a way to build that deeper sense of community. So we piloted our first international program in India in 2013, and we brought together 12 patients and survivors, half American, half Canadian, and we had this 2-week experience on the ground in New Delhi where we volunteered, we did some personal growth and development activities, we saw the Taj Mahal. It was this really powerful way to bring people together in community, and that was just the beginning. That was, you know, hard to believe 7 years ago, but we've really expanded the way that we think about community and the way that we run our programs over these last 7 years.
And so of those trips you've taken, maybe that first one, is there a story of somebody's, and I hate to say awakening, is there a story of somebody's experience that, you know, still resonates? I'm sure they all resonate with you and hang with you today, but is there a special one that you kind of want to share with us?
There's so many, but the one that just came to mind was a program we did in South Africa in 2015 with a woman named Rebecca, just this amazing Australian woman who's a designer and was really not defined by her cancer experience. Even though she was living with stage 4 breast cancer, she was bald, she was obviously in treatment. But there was this really powerful exchange. We were working with a women's empowerment group in South Africa, and she had this amazing design experience, and she was helping take photographs of these products that these women had made and capturing their stories, and she put them into this really beautiful catalog for them. But what was so powerful is we were sitting around having this activity where we were sharing stories of struggle and resilience. And these women who'd been through so much couldn't believe that she was living with stage 4 cancer. You know, they sort of saw her initially as a white woman of privilege, and then they saw her for what her story was, the fact that she was in the midst of stage 4 cancer and she was there helping them. And she really was so excited to do it because she didn't want to be defined by cancer. And that story, Rebecca since passed away, but her story lives on.
Internet's not good upstairs.
Sorry, Terri. This is my homeschooling effort of a 5-year-old.
Oh, good.
Yeah, you can try it there. Can you just keep it down a little bit, buddy? Oh, mommy's saying you can go downstairs. Is that okay? Yeah. All right. Sorry.
Okay, don't worry. This is life in COVID-19.
No question. We are all managing. So, and he's usually pretty good. He knows that when Daddy is talking into his phone, which probably happens more often than I would ever wish to admit, that especially when it's on a stand, he knows that Daddy's in the middle of something. So, sorry. Yeah, that story of Rebecca is powerful. And what I've heard is, you know, if we talk about, you know, first off, I love that you're constantly using the word resilience, because I think that is, you know, hopefully everybody doesn't have to go through a cancer journey to build the resilience, but it's resilience that we all, I think, are building as we go through any challenge. We get to the other side by building the resilience, which comes from coping in the immediate issue, but also finding the solutions to move forward. But there is, I've heard a consistent message in there, which is about connecting and conversations. So of all the stuff that you do when you're on your trips, when you're, talking to people and building connections to new people that are joining your community, what role, how important is that connection, peer-to-peer support, but even, to people who may not have lived experience, but just having somebody to talk to, how important is that for what you do and the experience that you've been through?
I think a sense of community is critical for healing. And that's why I appreciate what you do so much, because I think our physical and mental health is so related to our ability to feel connected and less alone. And we use the word tribe when we talk about our community. And so, it's this sense of being part of this tribe. And we double checked when we're in Kenya, because we launched a new program with Kenyan patients and survivors this last year, and said, are we allowed to use the word tribe? Because they have 40 plus tribes and we didn't want to be appropriating their term, and they loved it. They said, we might be part of our Kenyan tribe, but we want to also be part of the Fresh Chapter tribe.
I love that.
This idea that we're all sort of part of the same community. And what we've realized is that as we moved our programs into a virtual setting with our new Ignite experience, which is a 10-week virtual program where we're offered just in a different way, that really what people get the most they get out of the program is that sense of knowing they're not alone and feeling like they have other people who can relate and want to explore these same themes and topics with them. And it's that connection and that friendship that sustains them, whether they're meeting in Peru or they're meeting online. It's that feeling of, hey, I'm not in this alone. It's so powerful.
Yeah, we're very, what I love about the approach that we've taken in our campaign is to say that we were never anti-technology. It was really about us all finding the balance of staying connected face to face. But, oftentimes, and as we go through a pandemic, the only option we have is through technology. And what a beautiful thing that I believe you're in San Francisco, or no, you're in San Diego.
I'm in San Diego right now.
You're in San Diego, I'm in Toronto, and we're having an incredibly, for me, a very emotive conversation right now. And I think, isn't that the amazing thing of technology, that in these challenging times, these are a great way to supplement the relationships that we will get back to, that we will get to go on your next trip, and you will get to bring that alumni conference together where everybody can hug it out and can fist bump and high five and do all those things, because we do need that human touch. But isn't it amazing that you can still create that bond and that connection, because people do need it in in the crisis that they've gone through, but also during these pandemic times.
Absolutely.
So you've adapted, and you've pivoted, which I seem everybody's using the pivot word. So you've pivoted. And what do you see, as you move forward? I guess none of us really knows what the outcome of this is going to be. But as soon as we can get back to connecting, what are the different types of programs that you're going to be? So I heard you talk about the alumni, but what's your aspiration list for what comes next for a Fresh Chapter?
Well, it's interesting because last summer we came up with a big, hairy, audacious goal for where we're going as an organization.
You've worked in the corporate world at some point, my lady.
It's a BHAG, I know. And so our big, hairy, audacious goal, or a BHAG, is to reach 1 million lives by 2025.
Wow.
And we had started thinking about that last summer. So we had already started thinking about, there's no way that we can do that with on-site programming alone. So really thinking about how do we start to expand virtually and be able to scale our programs, which is what we piloted our first Ignite experience in January. And our last session of the 10-week series was on March 11th, right when the world started to close down. So thankfully, we have a model that we were already working on, that we've already developed. But we're also doing really interesting work in Kenya, where we're taking our current model and we're looking at how do we adapt it for the culture? And then how do we create a toolkit or the tools that people need that are Kenyans that can go and take the model out into the community. So really looking at different strategies where it's not just about North Americans volunteering in other countries. That will always be a part of what we do, but I think it'll be a much smaller part as we think about how do we scale and how do we empower people to make these tools their own, and really grow in that way. So I'm really excited about that. And I think if I was busy getting ready to go to Kenya and Peru this year, I wouldn't have the time to think about that scaling strategy, and our team would be really focused on operations and logistics. So it's actually this really interesting opportunity to see things from a different perspective.
Isn't that amazing that, and I've heard this repeatedly, a lady by the name of Susan Chamberlain, who was on a couple Fridays ago. She's from a family and child mental health organization called the George Hull Center in Toronto. And she said, Pete, we were always about face-to-face interactions with our clients and with our families. And, you know, now they're 100% digital, and they will come back. You know, we've gone from one extreme to the other extreme, and we'll settle somewhere in the middle. But isn't it powerful that, you know, again, we've almost been given, and I, as the champion of face-to-face, that I almost feel kind of funny saying that, but we've been given an opportunity to test out technology for what it can do and what digital can do to supplement the relationships, or provide another opportunity and an opportunity to outreach to people that maybe they'd never be able to get connected face to face, but you're still going to be able to bring them together and support them in the way that a Fresh Chapter does for other people who get to go on a trip.
100%. You know, I think that there's many, many people who, because of life circumstances or health stability, would never be able to travel with us, and helping them understand that really the core of what we do, yes, the travel and the volunteering is a piece of it, but it's really that deep reflection and that deep sense of community that you can share with people how you're struggling with the topics that we cover, like uncertainty. You know, how do you manage uncertainty when you're dealing with living with a cancer diagnosis and you know you'll never be out of treatment? Or how do you manage seeing your story from a different perspective? And so those kinds of themes, you don't have to be in Peru or Kenya to explore them. You can do those virtually, and in our virtual programs, we also have partner discussions each week. So you might be in a group of 10 people, but over 10 weeks, you're going to get to know each person one-on-one. And it's those types of connections that sustain us long after we finish any kind of program. And I love that those friendships will sort of dot all over North America, and we have international people in our programs. And so that we can continue to create this fabric of connection that helps people through the uncharted time ahead.
Yeah, I think it really is, you know, again, I'm a big Maslow's fan. So the idea of belonging, and to think that you have a community of people spread all over the world. And I, you know, heard of similar communities for different reasons, but the ability that if at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're not feeling yourself and you want to pick up the phone and call somebody, or pick up Zoom or FaceTime or whatever platform you're going to use, and know that somebody somewhere else in the world that's part of your community will be ready and waiting to take your call, just to me is just so powerful. As we, and I've never been affected personally by cancer directly, and I can't imagine that challenge, but I feel the need for connection right now through the pandemic. So I'm going to assume it's, you know, a multiple of how I'm feeling, the emotions that I'm feeling right now. So I can only imagine how great it is to feel like you belong to a community that's spread across the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's all about belonging.
Yeah, 100%. So before, we're not going to finish off yet, but just now, how do people find you? How can they contact you? How can they find out more about a Fresh Chapter? Let's just give everybody some of the information that they may find useful.
Yeah, the best place to find us is on our website, which is afreshchapter.com. You can also find us on social media at A Fresh Chapter on most of the channels. And if you're interested in our Ignite experience, which is our virtual program, we have rolling applications open right now. So people can apply, and the first step is to chat with someone on our team and explore if the program's the right fit. And then as soon as we have the next sort of class ready to go, there'll be an opportunity to join. And the Ignite experience is free, and it's open to patients, survivors, and caregivers impacted by cancer.
That's amazing. I can't believe, you know, I'm not surprised from you that it's free. And I also see that during this time, more and more people stepping up to say, hey, you know, the digital platforms in many cases are at significantly reduced prices or free as well. So why not bring the community together and really just create conversation and help people, so that when we do get back to the new norm, that if there is a business or if there's money required to create sustainability in whatever program, that people will recognize who are the people who stepped up during that time of need.
Absolutely.
So to this point, how many people have been through and I'm assuming then are still part of your community?
We've served nearly 300 alumni from mostly the US and Canada, but also some international people, including our Kenyan alumni who participated in our first Elevate program there last year.
And when you say the Kenyan, those are cancer survivors in Kenya as well?
Yeah, so this new program is this model of bringing together US cancer survivors or North American cancer survivors and advocates, skilled volunteers, and Kenyan survivors, as we really think about how do we bring sort of the best of our Fresh Chapter tools and connect it in with the best of their culture, and really think about how do we help people there in a country where there's so much stigma, where 70 to 80% of cases are diagnosed late stage. Many people see cancer as a death sentence. How do we help survivors feel empowered to share their stories so that we can change the landscape of cancer in Kenya? But that's really directed by our Kenyan participants because they are the experts, not us.
You know, Terri, I'm inspired. I'm in awe of what you're creating and the stories you're telling and the approach that you're taking. And even hearing that story of how, and I have heard this before, that cancer, you know, has huge stigma there. It's not, it's not, North America, when you get cancer, we feel, we have empathy, we have compassion for those who are going through the challenge and the journey. It's not quite as supportive over on in other parts of the world.
Yes, true. And there's just a lack of access to treatment and education. And so it's a much bigger problem than we can solve on our own. But if we can be part of this broader ecosystem of people looking to help solve that problem, then that's the kind of work that really inspires me and our team.
That's amazing. Hey, any role for, do you touch on caregivers at all? Because I know when I spent time in the cancer space overseeing the Movember campaign, I know a big area of focus for us was also making sure that the caregivers got the time and attention to recognize the incredible role that they play for connection, but also for support for those going through the cancer journey.
There's a huge need to support caregivers. And although our programs have always been open to caregivers, I think it's a lot harder to travel if you're actively caring for someone. And so as we expand our Ignite experience, we're really excited to have tribes or cohorts of just caregivers. So you could be in a group of 9 other caregivers and really go through the content and go through the experience with people who could relate not just to cancer, but to your experience as a caregiver. So we're currently working on corporate partnerships to be able to fund this expansion. But as soon as that comes online, we're really excited to be able to offer more to caregivers and more to men. I think there's a lot of men that are underserved when it comes to the cancer community. A lot of support programs tend to be very heavily women dominated. So really thinking about how do we make sure that our Ignite experience content is universal for everyone, but that we have male facilitators that facilitate male cohorts or tribes if men are looking for that kind of community with other men that have been through cancer. So really excited to expand in that way.
Yeah, it is. We're all so different, and it's amazing. And we do have the head of Movember Canada coming on next week to talk about the male journey. Not specifically through cancer, but just through the pandemic in whatever challenges they have. And there certainly are, whether it's ego or whether it's the folklore of the male species and how we're supposed to be tough and strong and all those, old folklorish type images. It makes it tough for people to step up and say, hey, I need help. I'm struggling. I need a conversation. Maybe do you think the digital space and the opportunity to, have to test out digital could play a role for the male population in allowing them to get connected without having to, step into a room or be face to face, which may be a challenge?
I think so. I mean, I rely heavily on our male alumni to be sort of the experts in terms of this, obviously. But I think there's the digital aspect and there's also the service aspect. I found that the men that have participated in our programs, the big draw for them is to volunteer and to help others and to really feel useful. And so I think even with our virtual program, we're looking at how do we inspire people to get involved in their communities. And if that's online during COVID and or in person once things open up and we can do that, encouraging people to have that as a thread through their 10-week program. But I'll be curious to see if virtual increases the ability for people to want to connect, for men to want to connect.
It's interesting, and I think our time, we're just about to wrap up here, but one thing I didn't build on, which I think is really important to capture as part of this conversation, is the value of purpose for all of us. Whatever the challenges that you're going through right now, and even for those that are struggling through the pandemic and having a tough day, the ability to turn our focus away from ourselves and onto who we can help. And right now, helping can be as simple as picking up the phone and calling a friend and saying, "Hey, Terry, how you doing today? What's going on?" Just knowing that that other person's day will be brightened by hearing your voice and knowing that somebody else actually thought about them, whether it's during a cancer journey or whether it's during a pandemic, I think is really, really powerful. And I'm glad that on your journey, that as you question the tight-fitting sweater and being a little pissed off, that what you connected with was purpose, because I think many of us are going to come out the other side of this pandemic having recognized, hey, in my toughest times, when I actually started to help other people is when I recognized how powerful purpose was. And there's even a former U.S. Surgeon General, you may have seen this already, because I get the feeling you might even be tied into, his community. But Dr. Vivek Murthy just came out with a book called Together. Have you seen it yet? Have you?
It's sitting just on my coffee table. I just started reading it.
How did I know? But,
Yeah.
within he talks about in the year that he took traveling the U.S. and talking to people. And I love it how he describes himself as kind of a junior, uneducated doctor doing what he did, which I know that's just a humble take of his on who he really is. But he just said the one thing that became really surprising to him was the power of purpose to make people feel connected, to get connected, to feel connected, and to have a higher meaning in their life, which I think is really powerful and something that I think you're building on as part of a fresh chapter.
I think, and I know we're almost out of time, but I think purpose is such a great antidote to fear. I had so much fear about recurrence of my cancer, fear of dying young. And so for me, part of the purpose was to channel my energy into that. And if I could focus my energy on something that made me feel inspired and purposeful, the fear just had less room. It doesn't mean that I'm never afraid, but it just means that it takes up a little less room in my brain. And that's true with this pandemic. I could spend a lot of time being afraid about the future of our organization and funding, but instead it's like, okay, what can I do? What can I do to help? How can I channel my energy right now into something purposeful? And that helps me get through the day.
Terri, I could talk to you for hours, because I know that we're on the same wavelength here. That purpose and getting connected to people is what we're about, from the idea of, if I can get you to talk to people, you'll get out of your own head. Because when we're in our own heads, we're not always the most complimentary to ourselves. And so I think if we can keep people connected, if we can help them understand the importance of staying connected to others through purpose, through reaching out to old friends, connections, whoever, by helping a neighbor or saying hello to somebody on a street corner, I truly do believe that together we can make the world a happier and healthier place. So I want to say thank you for your time today. I want to say thank you for doing what you do, because you are making the world an incredibly better place. And just by sharing these messages, even with people who may not be going through a cancer journey, I think you are enlightening people to a better, I don't want to say a better life, just to, choices. We all have choices. And especially as we're going through these challenging times, I think we all have choices to make with our days. And I think using some of your guidance would be valuable to many of us. So thank you so much for your time and for the incredible conversation.
It was such a pleasure, and thank you for what you do. It's just wonderful to see you out there connecting people and talking about this really, really vital topic. So appreciated the chance to connect with you here today.
Yeah, thanks, Terri. So just give us one more time. Just give us your platforms, email, wherever people should be going to find you.
Yeah, so its email is info@afreshchapter, all one word, .com. And our website is www.afreshchapter.com.
Awesome. And I've got one last question before we go. I try to finish off every conversation with, what's the one thing that you're looking forward to doing when this is over, whatever over is, but when we can go do what we want to do again, what's the one thing you want to go do?
I just want to hang out on a patio and have a glass of wine with my girlfriends or a cocktail and just, hang out and talk and laugh and enjoy the simple pleasure of being in great company.
I think that's a beautiful answer, and I love the use of the term a simple pleasure. I think many of us will appreciate the simple pleasures a little more than we did a mere 10 weeks ago. So Terri, thanks again. I hope we can talk again soon, because I need your motivation and inspiration more often in my life. And I really do appreciate your time today.
My pleasure. Take good care.
Okay, pal. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.